Well, first of all, the Port Authority of New York and New Jersey is a quasi-governmental entity which really needs to be looked at with a strong eye, and the City Council does have the power to institute hearings on what is going on in and around that, and we need to institute those hearings as soon as possible.
Is there a solution? I think so. They always got to sit down at the same table and work it out, close the door, lock the room, until a solution is reached. Don't let them out, because it's not a game, it's people's lives. And I think these our elected officials and this developer who are getting a lot of resources from the city just need to sit down and work it out.
That's a tough one. Yeah, I mean, you can give them a mandate that says either do it or we're going to go and get some other developer in here. I think the courts would back them up, especially after all this time. You're talking about 9 years of this garbage going on. And granted, a lot had to do with the insurance companies from overseas not paying, which they could have got them to pay if they used a little muscle in the first place, the Governor Pataki and the mayor. That's the only way I think you can really do it legally. You have to push them with legislation and just get another developer or threaten to.
Yes, and the solution involves the creation of an independent monitor to oversee timetables, benchmarks, as work approaches those benchmarks and timetables, to spot troublesome areas before they evolve into a real additional delay, and where disagreements exist, to mediate, and if necessary to arbitrate. I have proposed that. In the interim, the role I have played as chair of the Lower Manhattan Redevelopment Committee has in fact pushed progress along. We'd be a lot further behind, as I explained earlier, if it wasn't for the role I played as chair of the committee.
I think there will be a solution. I think this is a very tough economic time for both the private developer and for the city and for the Port Authority's capital budget. In the meantime, while that drags on, I think there's some really concrete things that the city can do to mitigate the impact of that ongoing mess to the residents and businesses of Lower Manhattan. That's what we should be focused on right now, is what can we do in our own community to make sure that while that negotiation concludes, that we can still have Lower Manhattan be a place that people want to live in and can run small businesses in.
In no way, shape, or form are we going to be a stable school system down here. When those two open up next year, we'll probably be 8 to 1,000 seats short anyway. What's happening is that you still have the kids that are 3 and 4 years old now. They're going to be going to the kindergarten. I think the easiest way to try at least is to go back to the developers that got the money from Liberty Bonds and no interest 30-year mortgages and go, listen, this is that you give us back some money. We'll build a school. Your apartments are 80% only occupied now. You'll get more people to come because they have schools near your building, and I think they'll get back some of the money.
We need another elementary school, middle school, and high school in our district. I'm very proud of my role in creating those 2 new schools. I think we're one of the only districts, if not the only one, in need receiving those schools, and that's a shame because all kids throughout the city need adequate school space. But we need to create those additional schools because our residential population continues to outpace, and I have shown the ability to link residential development to school creation. That's how we got those schools, specifically one of those schools linked to the Tribeca 5B development, and that's how I'm going to get the additional schools that we need.
We are nowhere near close to meeting the actual need of Lower Manhattan in terms of new school spaces, even with the addition of 2 new schools. I disagreed with the capital budget plan that did not call for an additional schools beyond the 2 schools. We simply need to build more schools. It's not rocket science. If you have people who are living in the fastest growing residential area of the entire city and they're staying and they're having kids, the schools should be built. That local government should be sensitive to those needs, find the locations, whether in existing sites are not developed yet, or in new developments that go up, to make sure that there are spaces set aside for schools. If local government can't provide schools for people who live in the neighborhood, local government really needs to be replaced, because that's a central function. It's like saying that electricity won't be provided on certain days. It's unacceptable.
The two new schools will help, but I think it's not going to solve the long-term problem. That what we need to do is look at every single development that will be going up in our city and in our district. We got to make sure that schools are in it. We have examples like in Battery Park City, in PS 89, where you have a public school on the ground level and you have housing on top. We need to do more of that, because we also need to have smaller class size. That will help the teachers and the students and quality education. So we need more school space.
Again, to reiterate my last question, or my last answer on schools and quality of life, is that there should have been provisions in the law, and the City Council should have overseen trigger laws mandating that any new development be linked, or any new permits for new developments be linked to the proper infrastructure, such as schools and libraries and firehouses and police stations. We have not, over the last 8 years, seen any leadership in this area. We needed this trigger law in effect 6, 7, 8 years ago, as the community was growing in leaps and bounds. To say that we're going to have these schools in the next 2 years, that's great, but those schools should have been built 6 years ago, not 2 years in the future.